Members come to us now asking for financial support. That has increased dramatically. There was another rep. He was saying that 2 days before payday, he had ran out of electric. There was nothing he could do. This shouldn't be happening.
In the UK, over 6 million people claim universal credit. Overall, 40% are in work. But in some areas, that figure is even higher. Under new rules, part-time workers who receive in-work benefits will be required to increase the number of hours they work. Those who work less than 18 hours per week on the national living wage will effectively be treated as unemployed. They will be required to meet a work coach weekly or fortnightly, show evidence they are actively looking to increase work hours, keep an online journal up to date. Those working between 18 and 35 hours a week will have to undertake training, as well as look to increase hours at their current employer or find additional work. Over 1 million working people will be swept into this draconian regime of in-work conditionality and sanctions. This change ignores individual circumstances, including the fact that many parents, carers and disabled people need to work fewer hours. If they're unable to comply with in-work conditionality, workers risk being sanctioned for a set period. This is a further attack on the lowest paid workers.
The cost of living crisis has increased over the last 10 years. Obviously, there hasn't been huge wage increases. For me personally, I claim universal credit due to leaving domestic violence. I left the marital home with just the clothes on my back. Claiming universal credit was a minefield. To claim universal credit, I had to prove that I was a victim of domestic violence. I had to give police records of cautions that was issued to my soon-to-be ex-husband, my solicitor's letters, my wages. I had to prove everything, and it was really quite degrading putting your whole life in front of someone you don't know, for them to decide whether you can get universal credit. I get universal credit to help me pay my rent. So, I'm grateful. I'm very, very grateful. Without that, I wouldn't eat, but it doesn't stretch. It's hard month to month. And I don't have any credit card TV packages. We're really cautious, but still, it is a struggle. I choose peace over finance. So I'd rather be safe than my daughter be safe. I always keep thinking, if the universal credit stops, what's going to happen to my daughter and me? Where do we go? I've got the biggest contract I can have in my job that I do, so there's no more that I can do there. But actually this last 10 years of austerity is still affecting us. I don't think there's anyone that I know probably that isn't struggling.
Some sectors are far more significantly impacted than others. We've discovered that about 75% of people affected by these proposed changes are women. And in some areas of the economy, for example, the finance and legal sector, that rises to over 90%. So it singularly disadvantages women in work, and of course it also disadvantages disabled people as well. Many of whom will be part-time, so they again will be disproportionately impacted.
700,000 lead carers of children have been hit by conditionality changes, 340,000 of which are working, and over 27% are disabled.
Speaking to employers about universal credit and related employment policy, part of which we asked them about their views around in-work conditionality. A lot of the employers were quite concerned about the policy. Firstly, they didn't really know about the policies. If we speak to businesses, we know that there's a lot of flexible work that happens, so often people will be employed on a part-time basis but be expected to flex up. So if conditionality rolls out, employers were quite concerned that their flexibility would be reduced. Demands and expectations from the work coach and the employer might clash, and that puts both workers and employers in quite a difficult situation. Employers also voice concerns about the potential impact on the well-being of their staff if they're subject to pressure to look for work or to manage the demands of work with the demands of the work coach.
In-work conditionality is untested anywhere else in the world. The government has not undertaken proper impact assessments of these policies on workers, families or employers. In-work conditionality also has a detrimental impact on employers.
Now, what we'd like to do is have every employee on full-time salaried contracts. That isn't workable in business sometimes. You just can't afford to pay people when you haven't got the work coming in. You're either going to give them a full-time job or you're not. You've got to employ them, you've got the cost of training them, and then they have to go off and look for another job because you're not pushing them up to the 18 hours that are required, or as it's going to be in the future, potentially 35 hours. And the problem for a lot of these employees are they have to rely on public transport, so there is a cost for them getting to the job centre and a cost to get back to work. And if they're coming out of work to attend an interview, they've lost half or maybe a full day of pay. The idea of releasing individuals to attend work progression interviews with work coaches is counterproductive to both the employer and the employee, because it's actually taking the employee out of work to attend an in-work interview. If they're running a number of jobs, more than one job, and there's no main employer, it becomes impossible. They've not consulted me, and they've not consulted my peers. They've probably not consulted the unions either.
Neither trade unions or employer associations were consulted about these unworkable changes. For workers, the potential of in-work conditionality causes additional stress, especially during a cost of living crisis that follows a decade of austerity. Sanctions can cut incomes by up to £90 a week, with the average sanction being 11 to 12 weeks, triggering debt, rent arrears and food bank use. It's a downward spiral.
The UK policymakers have focused on this work first approach, which is basically about moving into any job quickly. Any job, then a better job, then a career. Now, the evidence base doesn't support that pathway. The approach that the UK is taking is an internationally unprecedented one, which really underlies the fact that it's really important that we are quite open and transparent about the new parameters that are being put in place. The fundamental driver of low-paid work, poor progression in the labour market does not lie with individuals and what they are doing in work.
The government's own research shows that conditionality forces people into poorly paid jobs, rather than employment that matches their skills and aspirations.
Ultimately, it rests with employers and the quality of work that they are offering. Now, we've got some brilliant employers. We can have fantastic examples of people paying a proper wage, really ensuring that there are those pathways in work for people to progress in, ensuring that people have got those opportunities to take up training and all those kind of important things that we know create good employment for people. The DWP has got a really important role to play. But also we need to be joining up with other departments who work with businesses or who provide childcare or training. So it's really important that we don't operate in those policy silos, in as much as the same way it's really important that we don't develop policy without all the people who are impacted.
The DWP's own evidence has shown that increasing in-work conditionality has minimal impact on earnings. It's time to rethink how people are supported to progress in work.
In terms of the in-work conditionality, it horrifies me, and I'm afraid it hasn't been fully thought through. The idea that you encourage people to apply for job after job after job, that costs us money, it costs us resources. We're a small business. I haven't got time to go through 50 CVs. I want the job centre to find the right person that fits the bill, who has the capabilities and can apply for the job. And I can then make sure that we take on the people that really are suitable for what we're offering. We need to be able to encourage people to have a choice about which direction their life is going in. Once you've done that, you will get your in-work progression. There's no need to sanction people. Just put them in the right job and in-work progression will come naturally. It needs a complete rethink.
As a union, we hold true to this view that for a business to survive, yes, of course, it's important that they're profitable and successful, but the employees are part of that success. And the basic premise of working is to give yourself a decent standard of living. If these changes are successful, is that we will worsen that. We will not make work pay, and we will actually discourage people from wanting to be paying their taxes and working. This will again worsen the situation of people on the very lowest of wages and conditions.
But when you go from working when you're 16 and you work hard, and I do work hard, to struggling, it's tough. We all at some point need a bit of help, you know, and there shouldn't be these caveats to that help, and there is so many caveats to universal credit.
Those in work will be impacted by the proposed changes to universal credit. This will impact every single MP and every constituency and every sector of the economy. So all the trade unions are impacted, but it impacts people in the community as well. And that's why it's important that we all stand together.
Say no to in-work conditionality. End it now.